Hey everybody, welcome back. Will got another race breakdown for you, buddy. Fixed gear crit. You ready for it?
I'm so ready.
This is the Randbezirk. Is that, am I saying that right?
Outskirts racing team.
Yeah. Bjorn sent it in. That's the name of his team. This is not Brooklyn. And that is not a statement. That is the name of this race, Will. This is not Brooklyn. I think it must be a play on the Red Hook series, right?
It's got to be. But this is in Germany, in fact.
This is in Germany. This is in Dresden. And this is a lot. We're going to link it down below, but it's at alive_inside.cc on Instagram if you guys want to learn more. And Bjorn submitted this footage, like we said. We're off, man. Fixed gear crit. Tell us about it, Will. What's the difference? First of all, you can't pedal or brake. Or sorry, you can't shift or brake. You can pedal all you want. Can't shift or brake.
Yeah, indeed. We are, let's say we're shifting gears from normal crit racing by not shifting gears at all. And that's because you just have one gear, no brakes. The courses have to be designed different because you can't really do a 90-degree turn while pedaling. Or at least a lot of people can't while going full race speed. And I think there are some unique talking points in this type of racing for just how you have to race it, and it affects the race dynamics a lot, so we'll look into that.
Get right to the front as quickly as possible because you're going to learn that it's really hard. Like, every position is consequential. I want you guys to pay attention to a couple of things. First, the gaps that open up. Because you can't, it's really hard to modulate your speed when you don't have brakes or gears. Things speed up and slow down more slowly because you're stuck in one gear, which means you are spun out when it's going really fast like it is now, and then you are grinding when you're coming out of one of the tighter, more technical corners. So that's why these gaps open up. And then the other thing is you'll notice that his power is going to do some weird stuff. Like when he's approaching a corner, when you're expecting 0 watts of power, you're actually going to see power. That's because you have to backpedal in order to slow down. Like stopping pedaling, well, first of all, you can't stop pedaling. Stopping power delivery to the pedals will eventually slow you down because of wind resistance, because of rolling resistance. But if you really want to slow down for a corner, no brakes. You can't just squeeze brakes. You have to actively backpedal. So you're going to see his power do some goofy stuff, which makes the racing hard because you're always on, right, Will?
Right. And I mean, if you were to forget that you were on a fixie, I know you have a fixie, Jeff, and I do. Sometimes you forget, and you stop pedaling, and you just get bucked. So that could happen in these races if you're used to riding a bike with a freewheel.
Oh yeah, big time. And I want to talk about equipment too. One thing I really like that's not often discussed about fixed gear racing like this is the barrier to entry. I know this problem in our sport is like, yeah, you want a race bike? That's going to cost you, you know? I would say like a couple $1,000 for like a proper race bike is kind of the minimum. But not in fixie racing. Like, the bikes are very simple, right? It's one cog in the back, one chain ring in the front. There's no hoods or anything. It's like very simple. So they're a lot cheaper. I think I have a state aluminum bike that costs less than $1,000 brand new, I think. Somebody's gonna probably link it and correct me, but it's something very cheap. And then the other benefit too is like I could throw the thing off into the Grand Canyon. I feel like it'd be fine. Like I could get on it and ride it after. They're very robust, right? It's not this fragile carbon race bike.
Indeed. Even more so, yeah, the little components on it. Like once it hits the ground, you're not going to have to replace a bunch of those. Nevertheless, the frame, like those things really add up when you go through a full season of crit racing and crit crashing.
And look at already, like, Will, you do a lot of cyclocross racing. I often compare this type of racing, fixed gear crits, to cyclocross racing because look at the field is just torn apart. His heart rate is pegged 197 beats per minute. It is like a crit race on steroids. Like it's even shorter, more intense, and especially this one because this is the final. So the way these generally work is it's not just a mass start lineup. You have to qualify to even make it to this position, which is the final race of the day. These guys have already raced at least a couple of times, and oh my god, he almost got wiped out in the corner there. And I know what you guys are thinking, if you rewind and watch that again, like, dude, why didn't homie just, like, squeeze the brakes and slow down? Don't forget, there are no brakes. Once you're committed to a line, you're committed to a line. There's no sudden movements, which, now that we've kind of extended this intro, Will, let's talk for a minute about like the safety in fixed gear racing, because there's kind of, the way I see it, it's like in some ways it can be a little safer because there's more predictability. There's nobody can squeeze a bunch of brakes, but also like you can't avoid stuff because you can't squeeze a bunch of brakes. What are your thoughts on that, Will? You had a good take a minute ago.
Yeah, I think it forces some good habits. It can definitely be a good way to get into racing just because of the fact that it is cheaper, but also these habits that you have to form of being more predictable and knowing where to attack, when to attack, to maintain that momentum. And you can't just like chop the heck out of a corner, hit the brakes super hard, and screw everybody else. Like you've got to know when to go and know when it's going to be smooth to go and safe to go. And I think that's a good reason why a lot of dudes in Euro racing came from the track. You've got like Bradley Wiggins and a bunch of those Tour de France pros that started racing on the track, and it gives you a lot of really good habits and really good behaviors that translates well to like geared bike racing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I haven't done many of these, but the first thing that came to mind when I first did I think it was that Red Bull one, the indoor track fixie crit race, was like, oh, this really comes down to just conservation of speed. And I know it's something I preach on the channel all the time, but it's worth repeating. Like that trumps any amount of fitness you have. Like if you're able to conserve your momentum through a course, you're gonna find success at a much lower average power, and that is like accelerated, pardon the pun, with fixed gear racing, because you can't, like, you have to conserve your speed, because you can't, with the single speed, you can't just continue grinding out of every corner. There's no shifting going on. So yeah, I think it develops great habits. I think it's a great point. Let's fast forward and see if he's able to close this gap down. All right, so he's working with this other guy in front of him to close that gap down, and yikes, he almost wipes out in that corner. And, you know, when Will and I first watched this, we're like, oh, he clipped a pedal. But when you take a closer look, which we'll slow down and play back for you right now, turns out he actually got stuck in this crack. Now, this is, I think, just a lapse in concentration. Dude's 195 beats per minute, right? Like, we're deep into this race, and this is their, maybe third race of the day. So I think that the guy was just seeing cross-eyed in front of him trying to close this gap down. And it reminded Will and I of tar snakes in the Midwest. Tell them about it, Will.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these races in the Midwest, like, they get cold roads all year and they can't repave them every year. So you put down this little tar patch over cracks in the road, and you don't really think about it when you're in a car, but when you take a really narrow tire and put it on there, especially on a hot day when it's super soft rubber, especially when you're cornering, like, you end up getting a little squirrely. It feels kind of like you're hitting a wet patch, and it can do a lot of similar things to your bike, like hitting that crack on corner entry can do. You get thrown around in little strange positions, but also what it does is it kind of makes the course more interesting. So you have to know where you're setting up, what angle you want to go across that tar snake, because if you hit it at a more perpendicular angle, so like 90 degrees, it's probably less likely to do weird things to your bike. But if you get your tires in that channel or in that tar patch, then it is going to do some weird things with your bike.
Yeah, this was like an expansion joint, so it wasn't a tar snake, but the principle is the same, and that's a great point. Like, you have to know your angle of attack. Like, you can't just ride right on top of it like that guy did, because I think he just lost concentration for a second. You either have to set up on the inside or set up on the outside of it and cross it at a hard enough angle so you don't get locked up. Because I saw a lot of people go down at the Niles crit race at Intelligentsia on tar snakes, because you would ride it and it's unpredictable and it grabs on to your 28 millimeter tire and just doesn't let you go until you wipe out. It's like hitting train tracks in this city, right? That's like a rite of passage for cyclists in San Francisco, is you wipe out on a train track because your tires get locked in. It's this kind of a similar thing. It just grabs hold and you're going down. So anyway, let's fast forward a bit and see if this race comes back together. Fingers crossed. All right, Will, lap and a half to go. And the lead group has not been caught. There are something like 9 riders in front of him, which is what Bjorn wanted, by the way. The footage he submitted in his notes, he was like, I wanted to get top 15, and I didn't want to get lapped. So check and check. Congrats, Bjorn. But we're going to see a very interesting lap and a half play out, because you're still fighting. Remember, guys, this is the final. Still fighting for these minor places. And there's a lot of interesting things that happen even though this isn't for first. So one thing about fixie crit sprints is there's like not really such thing as a fixie crit sprint. For one, like you can't really get on top of the gear, right? Because you're either going to be you're not going to have your ideal cadence worked out. And then the other thing is like it's just hard. Like look at he has like a bike length and a half to this rider in front of him. It's just hard to hold the wheel. So really what it comes down to is, in order of importance, I would say, is courage in the corners and like how technically proficient are you in taking these corners at a really high rate of speed. And then number 2 priority to find success in these situations on a fixed gear bike is like it's not even like your 12-second sprint numbers. It's like your 1 minute power, maybe even 2 minute power. Because look right here, I mean, he's not sprinting, but he is going hard to get in front of this rider in front of him. And it feels like at this moment, coming through 1 lap to go, sick crowds, by the way.
Yeah.
Doing 800 watts, like this is kind of what it's going to look like, is just like he wants to take choice lines through these corners. But what are your thoughts on this, Will?
Yeah, I think I really like racing in this way, and this technical course specifically allows that, but fixed gear crits kind of have to be technical in this way, and it makes for like kind of a Formula 1 style racing where it is about rider skill, making a gap and like maintaining a fast lap speed, because you're not going to make up a ton of speed on somebody just from like being in a group, especially when you got corners coming up this fast. And yeah, you have to take the correct lines and power out of them. It's a lot like cross, it's a lot like Formula 1 racing, and it makes for super interesting like lap dynamics on the last lap. It's not just a big sprinter that's going to win every time.
Yeah, totally right. And as a result, you guys will see, obviously, between him and this guy in front of him, where is everybody else? They are scattered throughout. The reason he said he didn't want to get lapped is that is a really common theme in these races, because the race just starts to split up. Like it's like a cross race. I mean, you guys just saw somebody on the right. They are like a half a lap down. You saw 1s and 2s. Is he going to be able to catch this rider in front of him is the question. So much of it is taking these corners at this crazy high rate of speed. And I'll tell you one thing that I did, if you guys are ever interested in doing this type of race, you can't stop pedaling, right? Like, so you can't bring your inside pedal up because it's a fixed gear bike. So in order to get used to where those limits are, the one thing I did when I was getting used to my fixed gear bike the first time I did one of these races is I put a little piece of paper I taped it to the underside of my cleat, and it hung down like 2 inches. And then I would go take corners in my neighborhood, and once you hear the paper touching the ground, you know you're getting close to scraping a pedal. Then you trim the paper anyway. He gets passed by, oh no, 2 more riders right at the line. Maybe even 3. And hey, why are people slowing down after the finish line? Oh, that's right. That's right, they can't.
They can't.
It gets me every time. It's like you said earlier about the getting bucked. It's so funny. Like, yeah, every roadie knows the feeling the first time you get on a fixed gear bike. You try to stop pedaling because of muscle memory, and you're like, whoa, you're riding the lightning.
Indeed.
So yeah, thanks Bjorn for sharing this footage. If you guys have footage you want to share, there's a link down in the description. It takes just a couple of minutes of your time. Will, good having you on, buddy. Thanks as always.
Thanks, Jeff.
Catch you guys in the next one.